the crystal being floated in silence before a wall of light. Data streams poured across the display like waterfalls made of pure information. Archivist Prime had spent 4,000 years studying new species. He had seen peaceful ones and violent ones. He had seen species that built great empires and species that destroyed themselves before leaving their own planets. But he had never seen anything like this. The probe had found them in a quiet corner of the galaxy, a small yellow star with 8 planets circling it. The third planet from the star was blue and green and white. It was a beautiful world, and it was home to something terrible. They called themselves humans. Moved through the data slowly. He wanted to be sure. He wanted to believe he was making a mistake. But the numbers did not lie, the images did not lie, the recordings did not lie. These creatures had only discovered space travel 300 years ago. In that short time, they had spread to 17 different star systems. Their population had grown to hundreds of billions. They built cities on frozen moons and burning deserts. They lived in places that should have killed them. And they were always fighting. The archivist watched recordings of human wars. He saw them kill each other with primitive weapons and advanced ones. He saw cities burn. He saw millions die. And then he saw something that made his crystal body flicker with fear. After each war, they came back stronger. They did not destroy themselves like other violent species. They learned from their mistakes. They built better weapons. They created better medicines. They grew more united with each conflict. It was as if war made them more powerful instead of weaker. Read the biological reports next. Humans were persistent predators. This meant they did not kill their prey quickly like most hunters. Instead, they followed their prey for hours or even days. They walked and ran until the animal was too tired to move. Then they killed it. What kind of creature hunted like that? What kind of mind could stay focused on killing for so long? But that was not the worst part. Humans had taken the most dangerous animals on their planet and turned them into companions. They lived with wolves. They kept cats in their homes. They rode on the backs of massive beasts that could crush them with one step. They called these killing machines their friends. They called them family. Their own planet had tried to destroy them many times. Ice ages had covered their world in frozen death. Massive volcanoes had blocked out their sun. Plagues had killed huge portions of their population. Asteroids had struck their world with the force of nuclear weapons. And humans had survived everything. The archivist ran the classification algorithm. This program had been used for 12 million years. It had studied almost 5 million different species. It measured everything about a species and decided how dangerous they were. Most species were classified as green or yellow, safe or mostly safe. Some were classified as orange, dangerous but manageable. Very few were ever classified as red. The result appeared on the screen instantly. Felt his ancient mind struggle to accept what he was seeing. Category Red, Apex Existential Threat. In 12 million years, only 3 species had ever received this classification. The first had destroyed itself in a civil war that burned half a galaxy. The second had tried to consume all life in the universe before the conquered stopped them. The third had nearly succeeded in ending all civilization before a coalition of 500 species destroyed there. Now there was a fourth. Transmitted his findings to the Galactic Conquered High Council immediately. Within hours, the emergency session began. Representatives from over 600 species gathered in the Great Chamber of Concordance. Some floated in tanks of liquid. Some existed only as clouds of gas. Some were so large they appeared only as holograms. Some were so small that millions of them shared a single seat. Grand Arbiter stood at the center of the chamber. He was in being, tall and thin, with 4 arms and eyes that saw in every direction. He read the archivist's report aloud. Every word fell into the chamber like a stone dropping into still water. When he finished, no one spoke. Admiral broke the silence first. He was a species of reptilian warriors who had conquered their entire star system before joining the conquered. His scales were dark green, and his eyes were cold. "We must destroy them now," he said, "before they grow any stronger. A single strike while they are still primitive. We can end this threat before it truly begins." "You speak of killing billions," Ambassador Yeel replied. He was a communion empath, a being of living gel who could feel the emotions of others. "You speak of genocide based on what they might do, not what they have done." "I speak of survival," answered. "Look at the data, look at what they are. They fight constantly, they conquer constantly, they grow constantly. If we wait until they are a true threat, it will be too late." "The algorithm has been wrong before," another voice said. "The algorithm has never been wrong about a red classification," shot back. 3 species in 12 million years, all 3 nearly destroyed everything. Would you wait for these humans to do the same? The debate continued for many cycles. Species argued with species. Old alliances strained. Old fears surfaced. Everyone remembered the 3rd red classification. Everyone remembered how close they had come to extinction. In the end, they reached a compromise. "We will not destroy them yet," Grand Arbiter announced. "But we will not ignore the threat either. A quarantine barrier will be placed around human space. They will be contained. They will be watched. If they attempt to break through the barrier, we will respond with full force." The chamber voted. The motion passed with a large majority. Far away, in a small solar system on the edge of the galaxy, humanity continued living their lives. They went to work. They raised their children. They dreamed of the stars and the friends they might find there. They had no idea that the galaxy had already found them. They had no idea they had been marked for death. The quarantine fleet began moving into position. Thousands of ships from dozens of species. The largest military operation in 3 million years. All of it pointed at one small blue planet. Humanity looked up at the night sky and saw only stars. They did not see the cage being built around them. They did not see the guns pointed at their world. Not yet. But they would learn soon enough. And when they did, the galaxy would discover that the classification algorithm had made one terrible mistake. It had underestimated what humans would do to survive. Captain stood on the bridge of the UESC Magellan and watched the stars stretch into lines of light. The ship was jumping to a new system, moving faster than light itself. Every time she saw this, she felt like a child seeing magic for the first time. The Magellan was humanity's pride. It was the largest exploration vessel ever built. 340 crew members from 37 different nations worked together on this ship. They carried messages of peace recorded in 200 languages. They carried golden discs filled with human music and art. They carried gifts and greetings and hope. Had trained her whole life for this mission. Humanity was finally reaching beyond its small corner of the galaxy. They were going to meet their cosmic neighbors. They were going to make friends among the stars. She had no idea how wrong she was. The ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel near the edge of the solar system. The stars stopped stretching and became points of light again, looked at the main display, and waited for the navigation computer to confirm their position. Instead, alarms started screaming. "Captain," the sensor officer shouted, "there is something ahead of us, something massive." Looked at the display. At first, she did not understand what she was seeing. There was a wall in space, a shimmering barrier of energy that stretched in every direction. It was so large that the sensors could not find its edges. "What is that?" she asked. Before anyone could answer, the wall began to glow brighter. Points of light appeared along its surface. Dozens of points, then hundreds, then thousands. Ships. They came through the barrier like fish swimming through water. Ships of every shape and size. Some were long and thin like needles. Some were round like bubbles. Some had shapes that human minds could not fully understand. They moved into position around the Magellan with perfect coordination. Counted over 3,000 vessels. Each one was larger than her ship. Each one had weapons that made the Magellan's defenses look like toys. "We are being hailed," the communication officer said. His voice was shaking. "Put it through," ordered. The main screen flickered. A face appeared. It was not a human face. It was reptilian, with dark green scales and eyes like yellow ice. The creature wore what looked like a military uniform. "I am Admiral of the Galactic Conquered Quarantine Fleet," the alien said. The words came through a translator, but the voice was cold and clear. "You have approached the boundary of your designated containment zone. Turn your vessel around immediately." Felt her heart beating fast. This was first contact. This was the moment humanity had dreamed about for centuries, and it was nothing like the dreams. "I am captain of the UESC Magellan," she said, keeping her voice steady. "We come in peace. We carry messages of friendship from our world. We wish to—" "Your wishes are not relevant," Admiral interrupted. "Your species has been classified as a Category Red threat. You are contained within your current space. You will not expand further. Any attempt to cross this barrier will result in your complete destruction. This is not a negotiation. This is a warning." Felt the words hit her like physical blows. Threat, contained, destruction. "There must be some mistake," she said. "We have never met your people before. We have done nothing to threaten anyone. We only want to—" A beam of light shot from one of the alien ships. It struck the Magellan's communication array. The explosion rocked the entire vessel. Crew members fell from their seats. Alarms screamed even louder. "That was a warning shot," Admiral said. "The next one will destroy your ship. Turn around. Go back to your cage. Tell your people what you have learned here today. Tell them that the galaxy does not want them." The screen went dark. Stood in the silence that followed. Around her, crew members picked themselves up off the floor. Some were bleeding. Some were crying. All of them were looking at her, waiting for orders. "Take us home," she said quietly. The Magellan limped back to Earth with a hole in its side and a crack in its soul. When delivered her report to the United Nations, she watched the faces of world leaders change. She watched hope die in their eyes. Humanity had dreamed of finding brothers and sisters among the stars. Instead, they had found prison guards. The reaction came quickly. Some people called for peace. They said humanity should accept its place. They said the galaxy was large and surely humans could find happiness within their small territory. Better to live in a cage than die fighting against impossible odds. Others called for answers. They demanded to know what Category Red meant. They demanded to know why humanity had been judged before they had a chance to speak. They demanded to know who had given these aliens the right to decide the fate of an entire species. A smaller group said something different. They looked at the recordings of Admiral. They studied the alien ships and their impossible technology, and they asked a question that would change everything. "If they are so afraid of us," they whispered, "maybe they have a reason to be." Deep beneath the Swiss mountains, in tunnels built during ancient wars, the world's greatest scientists and military leaders gathered in secret. They called their project Prometheus, after the god who stole fire from heaven and gave it to humanity. "We need to understand why they fear us," said Doctor, the project leader. "We need to find out what they know about us that we do not know about ourselves." "And then?" asked General Sarah. Doctor looked at the images of the alien armada on the screen. 3,000 ships, weapons beyond human understanding, an entire galaxy standing against them. "Then we decide if they are right to be afraid," he said. Outside, the people of Earth continued their lives. They went to work and raised their children and tried not to think about the cage around them. But something had changed. Something deep in the human spirit had been wounded. Return to space eventually. She commanded a patrol ship on the edge of human territory. Every night she looked at the barrier that kept her people trapped. Every night she remembered Admiral's cold eyes. "Tell your people what you have learned here today," he had said. She had told them, and now humanity was learning something else, something the Galactic Concord should have considered before they built their wall and pointed their guns. Humans did not stay in cages for long. When pushed, they pushed back. When cornered, they became dangerous. When told they could not do something, they found a way. The universe had tried to kill humanity many times. Ice ages, plagues, disasters of every kind. And humans had survived all of it through stubbornness and creativity and sheer refusal to give up. The Galactic Concord thought they were containing a threat, but they were doing something far more dangerous. They were making humanity angry. And an angry humanity was exactly what the classification algorithm had warned them about. 3 years had passed since the Magellan came home with its terrible news. 3 years of watching the barrier. 3 years of living in a cage. 3 years of asking questions that no one could answer. Until now. Admiral Way stood before the United Earth Council. He was an old soldier with gray hair and tired eyes. He had fought in wars on 3 continents before the aliens came. Now, he led humanity's secret intelligence efforts against an enemy they barely understood. "Project Prometheus has completed its work," he said. "We have decoded their transmissions. We have studied their archives. We have learned the truth about the Galactic Concord and their classification system." The council chamber was silent. Every leader on Earth was watching. Every nation waited for answers. "Category Red is their highest threat level," continued. "In 12 million years, only 3 species have ever received this classification. The first went to war with itself and destroyed half a galaxy. The second tried to consume all life in the universe. The third nearly ended all civilization before a coalition of hundreds of species destroyed there." He paused and looked at the faces around him. "We are the fourth." The room erupted in chaos. Leaders shouted questions. Some demanded to know how this was possible. Others asked what humanity had done to deserve such a judgment. Raised his hand for silence. "We have done nothing," he said. "That is the point. The classification system does not judge species by their actions. It judges them by their potential, by what they might do. We have been found guilty of crimes we have not committed yet." "Then we must prove them wrong," one leader said. "We must show them we are peaceful." Shook his head sadly. "I wish that were possible, but the records show something else. Once a species is classified as Category Red, the classification is permanent. No appeal, no review, no second chances. In their eyes, we are already guilty. The only question is whether they destroy us now or later." The silence that followed was heavy with fear. Every person in the room understood what these words meant. Humanity was living on borrowed time. "So what do we do?" the Secretary General asked. Stood, the tired look in his eyes hardened into something else, something dangerous. "We prepare," he said, "not just for war, for survival, for a fight that will require everything humanity has ever been." The response was unlike anything in human history. Nations that had been enemies for centuries became allies overnight. Factories that had built consumer goods began building weapons. Universities that had studied abstract theories began solving practical problems. Every scientist, every engineer, every soldier turned their attention to a single goal. Humanity would not go quietly into extinction. But humans did not only build weapons, they built something far more dangerous. They built understanding. Human psychologists studied the alien transmissions obsessively. They learned how different species thought. They found patterns in their decision-making. They discovered weaknesses in their logic. The conquered species were ancient and powerful, but they were also rigid. They had been doing things the same way for millions of years. They had forgotten how to adapt. Human strategists analyzed conquered military tactics. They were predictable. Every battle followed established rules. Every commander used approved strategies. There was no creativity, no innovation, no chaos. Humans were chaos made flesh. Human engineers worked with fragments of alien technology captured from probe debris. The conquered had developed this technology over millions of years. Human engineers improved it in months. They found ways to make it better, faster, more efficient. They combined alien science with human creativity in ways the conquered had never imagined. And human diplomats discovered something wonderful. The conquered was not as united as it appeared. Many species had joined the conquered by force. They resented their masters but were too afraid to resist. Others questioned the morality of destroying species based on probability calculations. Some had watched the recordings from the Magellan and felt sympathy for the creatures asking for peace. In secret, humanity began reaching out. A whispered message here, a hidden meeting there. Seeds of doubt planted in minds that were already uncertain. Not all aliens wanted humanity dead. Some wanted to understand. Some wanted to help. Meanwhile, the conquered council argued. Admiral pushed constantly for immediate attack. Every day we wait, they grow stronger, he warned. Their technology advances at impossible rates. If we do not strike now, we may never have another chance. Grand Arbiter counseled patience. The quarantine holds. They cannot escape. We should study them further before taking irreversible action. The debate paralyzed the council. Months passed without decision. Years passed without action. The quarantine fleet watched and waited, but no orders came. Then came the day everything changed. A young officer commanded a patrol ship near Barrier Station 7. He was eager to prove himself. He wanted to impress his superiors. He wanted to show that he was ready for bigger things. When a human research vessel drifted too close to the barrier, he did not wait for orders. He did not ask questions. He opened fire. The human ship was small. It carried only 23 crew members. They were scientists studying the barrier's energy patterns. They were not soldiers. They were not a threat. They died in seconds. Among the dead was Dr. Sarah. She was one of humanity's most beloved scientists. She had spent her career trying to understand the universe and find peaceful ways to contact alien life. In her final moments, as her ship burned around her, she transmitted a message. "We came in peace," she said. The message was broadcast in 6 different alien languages. "We only wanted to talk. We only wanted to understand. Why will you not let us live?" The message was picked up by sympathetic ears across the galaxy. Species that had questioned the war heard a dying woman asking for mercy. They heard a scientist pleading for understanding. They heard humanity speaking with the voice of peace even as they were being murdered. On Earth, the news spread like fire. Doctor was a hero. She was a symbol of everything humanity had hoped to achieve in space. And now she was dead, killed by an alien who shot first and never asked questions. Grief transformed into rage. Rage transformed into cold, focused determination. Admiral Wei addressed humanity for the last time as a defender. When he spoke again, he would speak as something else entirely. "They have made their choice," he said. "For 3 years we tried to show them who we really are. For 3 years we hoped they would see us as friends instead of monsters. Today they killed our best, and while she was asking for peace." He looked directly into the camera. His eyes were not tired anymore. They were burning. "They believe we are monsters," he said. "They have built their entire civilization around the idea that some species are too dangerous to live. They have judged us guilty without trial and sentenced us to death without appeal." His voice dropped to something cold and quiet. "Perhaps it is time we showed them what human monsters can really do." The barrier fell 17 hours later. Humanity did not ask permission. They did not negotiate. They did not beg. They calculated the barrier's weak points using 3 years of research. They built weapons specifically designed to tear holes in its energy field, and they attacked with everything they had. When the first human warships poured through the breach, the Galactic Concord realized they had made a terrible mistake. They had given humanity 3 years to prepare, 3 years to study, 3 years to turn fear into fury and grief into weapons. Now they would learn why the classification algorithm had marked humans as the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. Not because humans loved war, but because when they had no other choice, they were very, very good at it. The Galactic Concord had fought wars for 12 million years. They had defeated countless enemies. They had developed military strategies that worked perfectly against every species they had ever faced. None of it prepared them for humanity. Admiral commanded the defense of the supply lines. His fleet was massive. His ships were powerful. His officers were experienced warriors from a species that had conquered their entire star system. The humans should have attacked his front lines. That was how wars were fought. Fleets met fleets. The stronger force won. Simple, predictable, controllable. Admiral did not attack his front lines. Her third fleet appeared out of nowhere in the middle of his supply chain. One moment, the space was empty. The next moment, human warships were everywhere, firing at cargo vessels and fuel stations. They destroyed 12 logistics centers in 7 minutes. Then they vanished back into faster-than-light travel before warships could respond. By the time his fleet arrived, there was nothing left but debris. Reorganized his forces. He spread his ships out to protect every possible target. This was the correct military response. Every textbook said so. Every instructor had taught it. The humans attacked his front line while his forces were scattered. This was not how war was supposed to work. This was not honorable combat. This was chaos and confusion and constant surprise. Sent urgent messages to high command demanding reinforcements. The response took 17 hours because it had to pass through 17 levels of bureaucracy for approval. By the time reinforcements arrived, the third fleet had already destroyed 2 more supply chains and disappeared again. On Prime, the ancient crystalline beings prepared their defenses. Their capital city was built on a mountain plateau, surrounded by energy shields that could stop any bombardment. General Stone would have to land his troops and march uphill against fortified positions. It would be a slaughter. General Stone did not march uphill. Human scouts had spent months studying Prime. They had found something interesting. Beneath the capital city, there was a network of ancient tunnels. They had been built millions of years ago, during a time they had forgotten. Water and waste had once flowed through these passages. Now they were empty and abandoned. General Stone's troops entered the tunnels from the ocean shore. They walked for 3 days through darkness and silence. They carried their weapons and supplies on their backs. They slept in shifts and kept moving. When they emerged, they were inside the capital city, behind all the defenses. They surrendered within hours. They had prepared for an army at their gates. They had not prepared for an army in their living rooms. In the darkness between stars, Commander hunted bigger prey. His submarine-style spacecraft were designed for stealth. They moved slowly and silently through the void, invisible to conquered sensors. They waited in places where enemy ships would pass. When a target appeared, they struck fast and hard. Then they disappeared again. The conquered called them ghost ships. They never knew where the next attack would come from. Carriers and battleships began traveling in large groups for protection. This slowed them down. It made them less effective. It spread fear through their ranks. Conquered commanders had been trained to fight enemies who followed rules. Humans did not follow rules. They followed only one principle: win. But humanity's greatest weapon was not military. It was something the conquered had never considered. It was kindness. When human forces captured enemy soldiers, they did not torture them. They did not execute them. They did not leave them to die. Instead, they provided medical care. They gave them food and water. They treated them with dignity and respect. This was completely foreign to conquered warfare. Prisoners were usually killed or enslaved. The idea of caring for an enemy was absurd, wasteful, incomprehensible. But the prisoners talked. They sent messages home. They told their families and friends what the humans had done. Stories spread through the conquered like ripples in still water. "They healed my wounds," a soldier said in a recorded message. "They shared their food with me. They asked about my family. They are not the monsters we were told they were." Human forces also broadcast messages of peace alongside their attacks. Strange as it seemed, they explained that they did not want to fight. They said they were only defending themselves. They said they would stop attacking the moment the conquered agreed to talk. They shared human culture with anyone who would listen. Music that made alien beings feel emotions they had never experienced. Art that showed the beauty and tragedy of human existence. Stories of love and loss and hope. Evidence that humanity was more than just a threat classification. The conquered's alliance began to crack. The communion of minds was the first to withdraw. Ambassador Yield appeared before the conquered council with a simple statement. "We are empaths," he said. "We feel what others feel. When we reach toward these humans, we sense no evil. We sense no desire to destroy. We sense only desperate beings fighting for the right to exist. We will not participate in their extinction." His species pulled their ships from the war and closed their borders to both sides. Others followed. Species that had never wanted this war found the courage to say so. Species that had joined the conquered by force saw an opportunity to break free. The great alliance that had ruled the galaxy for millions of years was falling apart. Admiral found himself commanding a shrinking fleet against an enemy that refused to fight fairly. His supply lines were broken. His soldiers were demoralized. His allies were abandoning him. He made one final stand at the nexus of the conquered's capital station. It was a massive structure at the center of civilized space. If the humans destroyed it, the conquered would effectively cease to exist. Gathered every ship he had left. He prepared his defenses. He wrote messages to his family explaining that he would die with honor. He expected the humans to come with overwhelming force and burn everything to ash. Admiral Wei came alone. A single human flagship approached the Nexus. Its weapons were powered down. Its shields were lowered. It made no threatening moves. "We could destroy you," broadcast to everyone listening. "Every ship here, every station, every world that raised weapons against us. We have the power to burn it all." Waited for the attack command. It did not come. "That is what your classification system predicted, is it not?" continued. "That is what you believed we would do. That is why you caged us and tried to kill us, because you were certain we were monsters." The human admiral's voice carried across 1,000 frequencies, reaching millions of ears. "But that is not who we are. We fight because you gave us no choice. We kill because you tried to kill us first. But we do not want extinction. We do not want revenge. We want only what we have always wanted since the Magellan first approached your barrier." Paused, the galaxy held its breath. "We want to be your equals. We want to walk among you as friends, not as prisoners or monsters. We want peace, real peace, not the peace of cages and classification systems, the peace that comes when different peoples choose to understand each other." Stared at the single human ship. He had spent years preparing for this moment. He had imagined fire and death and the end of everything. He had not imagined this. "Your classification system is a self-fulfilling prophecy," said. "You treat species as threats so they become threats. You cage them and fear them until they have no choice but to fight. You created us, Admiral. Your fear made us what we are." "And what are you?" asked finally. His answer was simple. "We are human. We can be your greatest enemy or your greatest friend. The choice is yours. It has always been yours. We are simply asking you to choose differently this time. The Battle of Nexus ended without another shot fired. It was not over. Nothing was truly over. But for the first time since the barrier was built, there was hope. Humanity had proven something that the classification algorithm had never considered. They had proven that being dangerous did not mean being evil. They had proven that the capacity for destruction could exist alongside the capacity for mercy. They had proven that sometimes the greatest threat could become the greatest hope. 10 years had passed since the Battle of Nexus. 10 years since Admiral Wei offered peace instead of destruction. 10 years since the galaxy began to change. It had not been easy. Nothing worth doing ever was. The old classification system was gone now. In its place stood the Covenant of Understanding. This new agreement was simple in concept but revolutionary in practice. When a new species was discovered, they would be contacted with offers of friendship. They would be studied through dialogue, not surveillance. They would be judged by their actions, not their potential. It was humanity's gift to the galaxy. Human diplomats had worked with former enemies to write every word. Human lawyers had helped create a framework that balanced security with justice. Human psychologists had designed first contact protocols that emphasized communication over fear. Grand Arbiter stood at the signing ceremony. He was old now, his body showing signs of age. But his eyes were clear as he looked at the document that would reshape galactic civilization. "We spent 12 million years cataloging life," he said. "We measured everything except the one thing that mattered most. We never measured choice." Admiral Wei stood beside him. He was also old, his hair completely white, his body bent by years of stress and conflict. But his voice was still strong. "Every species has the capacity for good and evil," said. "We humans know this better than anyone. Our history is filled with atrocities and miracles, hatred and love, destruction and creation. We are not good or evil by nature. We choose what we become, every day, every moment. That choice is what makes us who we are." The signing was broadcast across the galaxy. Billions of beings watched as former enemies wrote their names on a document promising to do better, promising to understand before they judged, promising to give every new species the chance humanity had been. The integration that followed was difficult. Old prejudices ran deep. Many species still whispered warnings about the red category survivors. They watched humans with suspicious eyes and kept weapons close at hand. But change came, slowly and steadily. Human doctors developed cures for diseases that had plagued conquered species for millions of years. A plague that had killed billions of every century was eliminated completely by a human research team. Genetic disorders that had tormented since the beginning of their civilization were corrected by human genetic therapists. Human artists created works that moved the galaxy. A human symphony made the communion of minds weep with emotions they had no words for. Human paintings hung in museums on 1,000 worlds, teaching alien eyes to see beauty in new ways. Human writers told stories that crossed every barrier of biology and culture, touching hearts that beat in ways nothing like human hearts. Human engineers built bridges between worlds that had never cooperated before. They designed ships that could carry any species comfortably. They created translation devices that captured not just words but meanings, emotions, intentions. They connected the galaxy in ways that the conquered's rigid hierarchy had never allowed. And human soldiers became peacekeepers. This surprised everyone. The warriors who had torn through conquered defenses, the fighters who had proven so devastatingly effective, now stood between former enemies and prevented new wars. They were not peacekeepers because they were gentle. They were peacekeepers because they understood war. They knew its cost. They knew its horror. And they were determined to spare others from experiencing what they had experienced. When conflicts arose, human diplomats would arrive first. They would talk and listen and search for common ground. If talking failed, human soldiers would arrive second. Their presence alone was usually enough to prevent violence. Everyone remembered what humans could do when pushed too far. No one wanted to push them again. Stood on the observation deck of Nexus. She was director of the Office of Relations now. Her hair was gray, and her face was lined with years of work, but her eyes still held the same wonder they had held when she first saw the barrier that caged her people. The view had changed. Ships from 100 different worlds passed by in peaceful commerce. Vessels that had once tried to destroy each other now shared the same space stations, the same trade routes, the same hopes for the future. Ambassador Yield floated beside her. His gelatinous form shimmered with colors that expressed emotions human language could not capture. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we had succeeded?" he asked. "If the extermination order had been carried out?" Considered the question carefully. She had thought about it many times over the years. "I think you would have killed most of us," she admitted. "But not all of us. There would have been survivors, hidden in places you never thought to look, growing angrier with each passing generation, planning revenge, building weapons." She turned to face the empath. They would have come back eventually, and when they did, there would have been no admirable way to offer peace. There would have been no mercy, only the rage of a species that had lost everything. Yield's colors shifted to something darker, something sad. The classification algorithm predicted exactly that. It calculated our victory and our subsequent destruction. We saw the numbers. We simply chose to ignore them. "Then why did you fight at all?" asked, "if you knew it would end badly either way?" The ambassador was silent for a long moment. "Because it is easier to destroy what we fear than to understand it. That is not a human failing, Director. It is a universal one. Every species faces that choice. The easy path of fear or the difficult path of understanding. And now we walk the difficult path together." Nodded and turned back to the window. Below them, in the gardens that surrounded the Nexus, children played. Human children and children and children and children from species whose names still struggled to pronounce. They ran and laughed and chased each other around trees imported from 100 different worlds. These children had never known a galaxy at war. To them, cooperation was simply how things worked. Different species living and playing and learning together was not remarkable. It was normal. Perhaps that was the greatest victory of all. In his final years, Archivist Prime wrote one last entry in the great records of the galaxy. His crystal form was dim with age, but his mind remained sharp enough to recognize what he was recording. Species Humanity. Previous classification. Category Red, Apex Existential Threat. Current classification, Covenant Founding Member. He added a note beneath the official entry. "I was wrong about them. We all were. The classification system measured threat potential without accounting for the one variable that mattered most, choice. Humanity had the capacity to destroy us. Every projection showed they could tear the conquered apart if they wished, and they did wish it for a time. We gave them every reason to hate us. But when the moment came, when they held our survival in their hands, they chose mercy. They chose understanding. They chose to be better than we had any right to expect. The greatest threat to the galaxy was never a species. It was our fear of what others might become. We feared humanity because they were capable of anything. We should have realized that anything includes kindness. Anything includes forgiveness. Anything includes the choice to build rather than destroy. The classification system is discontinued. The covenant of understanding is active. The galaxy endures. Humanity endures. Together, he sealed the record and transmitted it to every archive in known space. Then he dimmed his light and allowed himself to rest at last. Above 1,000 worlds, humans looked up at stars that had once been forbidden to them. They told their children stories of the time when the galaxy tried to cage them. They told stories of fear and war and the choice that ended it all. and the children listened with wonder, hardly able to believe that things had ever been different. They looked at their classmates and neighbors and communion friends, and the old stories seemed like fairy tales, impossible, ancient, irrelevant to the galaxy they knew. That was exactly what humanity had fought for, not revenge, not conquest, not the destruction of their enemies. Just a future where children could look at the stars without fear, a future where different species could be friends instead of threats, a future worth building instead of a past worth destroying. Stayed on the observation deck until the station's artificial night dimmed the lights. She watched the last ships pass by and listened to the sounds of a galaxy at peace. It was not perfect. It would never be perfect. Old wounds still ached, and new problems arose every day. But it was better. Every year it was a little better, and that was enough. She smiled